slide here. There we go. So this is just a quick slide talking about our database structure. Everything that you see on the website today is going to be an aggregate of all the information that we collect internally. We have 3 separate teams that are really doing the bulk of the research, and that takes up 2/3 of our company. The first one here in the middle is going to be the property level information. And that we actually speak to people on site for. So we'll call a property manager, a leasing agent, an owner, again, anybody who would really know about the day-to-day performance of a property, as well as its historical performance. And we'll use that information to do a market survey. So again, 37 years of history. You can see that in our trend lines. We'll collect information such as rents, vacancies, amenities, tenant level information, expenses, concessions, and all those different performance indicators of a property. Moving over to the right here, you have the sales side. So we have an entire team there collecting information on sales transactions. That we've been doing since roughly early 2000s. And there we'll collect information on the transaction price. We'll also provide information on cap rates, pro formas. Generally, we try to look at deals above 250,000, but in some major markets where there are larger transactions, you'll see that broken out as well. The best thing about our sales comps is that we don't just stick to the markets. We will be able to go outside of those boundaries. So if there is a transaction that is on an island, for example, off South Carolina, like Daniels Island, that is something that we would be able to track, not just in the specific market itself. And then finally, towards the left side here, we have our new construction pipeline. So that is our 3rd team. And they're the ones who are speaking to the architects and the developers themselves, getting information on projects that are in the pipeline, really start to finish. So there are 4 different stages, essentially, that we would put into buckets. Looking at proposed properties, which are properties that are more in the idea stages. Perhaps it's just land, or it's another building of a different use type, and they're going to rehab it to a different property type, for example. Then we would consider it planned when it actually has its permits filed, or there have been blueprints or some sort of ecological review. It's actually something in place to start building this project. Next, we have under construction, and that just means that the property has broken ground. There's a shovel in the dirt. You see a structure in place. And then finally, you have completed. And that will mean that a property has a certificate of occupancy, whether that's partial or full, doesn't really matter. We just need to know that this property is considered completed. Now, that being said, all this information here up towards the top row is going to be funneled into our historical trends and our forecasts. And that's what we'll be looking at today. Again, segmented markets, 37-year time series, as well as a 5-year forecast. And I'll go into a little bit more detail there once we get to the website. Now, on the right-hand side, this is a very quick market count. We'll just let you know what our full coverage looks like. You guys do have access to multifamily, office, retail, as well as warehouse and flex. And you can see the coverage there. In terms of the markets you have access to, every single market in Texas, primary and tertiary. And I'll show you a map of that on the website. Now, based on client feedback, what we really focus on here is performance indicators, just to help you guys make decisions. Now, you can look at the past, present, or future on our website. We'll provide you with property level analysis, historical trends, as well as forecasted fundamentals. And again, that goes back to the 37-year time series and our 5-year forecast. In terms of how we forecast, we're able to do so because we have internal in-house economists. That's leveraging our proprietary database, our new construction, and economic and demographic data that we actually get from Moody's. So that being said, that's just a little bit about our methodology and who we are as a business. And now I'm going to take you directly to the website so we can start pulling some reports. So the first thing that I've selected here is the Market Reports tab. I just want to show you a quick map of the coverage. I've selected one market. Now, if there's a chance that you are looking at multiple markets, you can select them through here, through combined metros. Again, that's every single market in Texas. Let's just go ahead and select single metro. I've gone ahead and selected apartment. We'll go over to Texas. and then we can choose the various markets. So anything that is in a square is actually going to be a primary market, while anything in a circle will be a tertiary market. So you can see, again, here's your full coverage of the metro. So for the example today, what I thought we would do is just kind of stay local. We'll look at Austin, but again, any of these markets are applicable. So ranging from Amarillo to Corpus Christi, those are going to be your tertiary markets. From San Antonio over to Austin, Dallas, Fort Worth, etc. Those will be your primary markets, and those will also be segmented down into submarkets. So let's start with an apartment example, and again, we'll go to Austin. Now on the left-hand side, you're going to see the entire map segmented out into submarkets. And we're able to do this by looking at natural, economic, and man-made boundaries, but also considering how that market has moved over time. Again, that 37-year time series really gets us a good handle on how a market has performed, whether it's over various business cycles. If you wanted to look at how a market reacted after the recession, we could look at that as well. I believe this is going to be considered the central submarket, and it covers right over downtown area. So when I click that, you can see where the boundaries fall, and you'll also see it on the list right below. Now, I know most of you are probably pretty familiar with most of these markets, but again, this is a pretty good way just to see where the boundaries fall and where the information will be pulling from. So I'm going to go ahead and generate my report. And this is going to give me a full list of all the reports you have access to. On the left-hand side, we are segmenting it out from submarkets all the way up to the greater metro. Again, this is going to be Austin overall. If you ever wanted a quick reminder, that's going to be over up here on the top right-hand side. So let's go ahead and select a few reports here. What I'll start with is the Excel version. For those of you who are more interested in the hard numbers, we can look at that. For those of you who are more interested in the charts and graphs and the analysis, you'll see that in the PDF version of the report. Oh, my apologies. Yes, so you do have access to the PDF, so let's go ahead and run that. Thank you, Amy. Okay, so I'm actually going to pull, let's go ahead and pull all of these. Sometimes I like to pull them side by side, but yeah, let's go ahead and do that. And I'm going to go up here and select PDF. Now there's a pretty neat feature that we offer where you can actually put the firm's logo on the website. I don't know if that's something that you guys do.
Well, it's the TAR logo.
It has the logo on it already. Perfect. Now I already have my logo on it just because I'm running it internally, but that's something that you'll see as well. Yes. Okay. So I went ahead and downloaded all these reports. You'll see this full suite of reports is hyperlinked. So I'm just going to jump around here, really starting from the particular submarket. It'll take me right to it. So the very first thing that we'll do is dive into that submarket and look at the current quarter. Keep in mind that second quarter stats will be available on August 1st. The reasoning being that after the quarter ends, we have a 30-day window in which we are doing our QC work. So that's going to be the quality. Everything's accurate, checking for any outliers, recalling properties, pretty extensive process. Again, we want to make sure that everything that's released is accurate info. So second quarter, again, will be released on August 1st. So looking at the current quarter, first quarter, what we'll do is break down all the information for that submarket by vintage. So on the left-hand side, I'm showing asking rents by age. For example, if you're looking at a newer property within this submarket, average rents are $2,366. That's going to be gross. So we're looking at apartments that will be gross monthly rates. When we're done with this, we'll take a look at office and just show you the differences there. That will be more of a per square foot analysis. And then on the opposite then there, looking at older buildings, average rents are $1,059, again, gross per month. Now you might be looking at this and just wondering if there's any outliers. Are there any properties that are really bringing that average rent up? Looks like we have about one or two above that 3,300 range, almost at 4,000. And then if you look on the bottom end here, anything under 1028, just about 11 properties. So here we're actually distributing the average rents overall. Low, mean, median, high, 25% up to 75%. Now, again, this is all to talk about rent in general, but you may want to know how much of that is actually negative rent growth as opposed to positive. And that's what we're looking at here on the right-hand side. It looks pretty good. Most of the properties within this submarket are experiencing a positive rent growth, 39 to be exact. Moving down here, what we'll do is give you that historical perspective on the rent growth within that submarket, the metro, the region that you're in, so Southwest, as well as the entire country. So it looks like this particular submarket is doing pretty well. Rent growth is actually higher than the entire country just in first quarter. I hear it's a little bit expensive out here. Now, again, I'm from New York, so I think we're kind of in the same boat. But again, you can see quarter over quarter, year over year, what that figure looks like. Although there was some negative rent growth in the last quarter and even the quarter before that, looks like it's bouncing right back. We can use that to benchmark against Austin overall. So that is going to look at all those submarkets as a whole. On the right-hand side, we can use those figures to rank that submarket. Austin will have 14 total. And now we are at number 6. So your number being a little bit lower is actually better. Looks like we were at 9 last quarter. So rent growth, again, just looking at negative to positive, we can bump up that rank figure. And then if you look at it from a more national perspective, 208 out of 835, all submarkets in the US. Now you may want to see this plotted out instead. That's what this chart is doing below. So just going back about 5 years and then forecasting out 5 years as well, we can really see the volatility of this particular submarket. Central is going to be the dashes here. So yeah, pretty volatile, it looks like, this submarket. But as we forecast it out, and again, that's really just based on what's coming online, the demographics of the market, seems like it's pretty moderate here. Now, we do offer different types of scenarios for forecasting. We'll offer both a moderate downturn as well as a severe. So essentially, the baseline is what you're looking at the top here. This is what we most likely believe to happen in the market. But if there were to be another crash, like a 2008 scenario, that would be considered pretty severe. That's a scenario 2. If we're looking at more of like a 6-month short-term recession, that would be scenario number 1. Okay. And we will do this for every single submarket and every single metro. Moving below, we're going to do that same type of analysis, but now focusing on vacancy. So newer buildings tend to have a little bit of a higher vacancy in this submarket, it seems. That can be anything from lease up to just newer properties, again, maybe taking a little bit longer time to stabilize. Whereas you look at older properties, they're right around 6.6%. Again, this is all information that we track internally. You're just seeing this full aggregate analysis. Right below that, seems like vacancies are actually a little bit higher overall than if we look at Austin in general. And the same methodology here, providing you with a submarket ranking as well as a chart. It actually seems like we project that vacancy rate to just go down over the next couple of years. The next section is actually going to break things down a little bit further. What we're doing here is looking at the individual bedroom types themselves. So all those figures that we looked at above, we're going to be weighted averages. This is to say, well, what if you actually take a look at it from just a studio perspective, or 1 or 2 or 3 bedrooms? What does that look like? And so we can show you the average rents as well as a per square foot and average square footage of those bedroom types. To the right, you have a quick historical perspective of the last few quarters, and then a point in time, over 1 year, over 3 year, and over 5 years. So you'll notice in a lot of these reports, you're going to see an annualized history. That's what we're doing here. On average, over 1 year, looks like about 1.4% in rent, on average over 3 years, and then on average over 5 years. The charts below will provide you with asking rent as an average for the month and then breaking it down by per square foot, not only in the submarket or metro, but specifically in that unit mix. And then this chart is pretty neat. What we're doing here is just showing you a quick layout of what this market actually looks like. Looks like it's primarily 1 and 2 bedrooms, not as many 3 bedrooms, and then 2 studios here, just at about 6.3%. and you can see the average size of those bedrooms as well. So we got really helpful information in helping you benchmark in individual properties and just getting a good understanding of where this market is for the current quarter. And the next section here should look pretty similar to the first two. We're going to do the same type of analysis where we look at information by vintage, but this is actually based on inventory. So what I heard was true about Austin. It seems like in the last decade or two, a lot of growth. So right away, I can see in the last, from 2000 to 2009, inventory is up. That's where your current inventory sits for the submarket. And on the right-hand side, you can see some of these markers that we're using to measure in this metro. So for example, how close is this submarket to the CBD, distance to the landmark, and then as well as distance to a highway. Something else that we're doing, and this is going to be taking place when we do our individual surveys, we're collecting concessions as well as expenses. So it looks like within this submarket, on average, you're looking at almost a month of free rent. This is more like 3 weeks of free rent. And that's information that we get from speaking to individual properties and landlords and knowing if at all they were to offer any concessions, what does that look like? And then on this side here, we're talking about expenses. So anything from taxes to CAMs to insurance, energy, janitorial, all those different figures are rolled up here into a percentage of revenue. So for every $100 spent, you're looking at about $48 dedicated to operating expenses. This is your expense ratio. And it looks like a lot of that growth that we saw in that submarket was just a little over a year ago, sort of leveling out here. That seems to be the case even nationally. And again, providing you with a ranking on the right-hand side. We'll scroll down a little bit so you can see that chart as well. Now, we talked a lot about rent and vacancy within this particular submarket. The last couple of sections here are really going to drill into what the market is doing in terms of movement, leasing. So construction as well as absorption. For the current quarter, didn't look like anything was specifically built within that market rate side, but we had 82 units absorbed. Looks like a pretty similar scenario from a quarter ago. If we go back 1, 3, and 5 years, a lot of activity, a lot of building, but just as much absorption. So the demand is clearly here within this submarket. We can even provide you with a forecast of that as well. So it looks like a pretty good ratio here, about 1 to 1. This last section here is really just showing you what the vacancy rate looks like with construction in a particular time frame. So if we look at the current quarter, vacancy rate here is in red, about 10% it looks like. And then if you jump down here, you'll see the construction and absorption within that year. Here's a quick map of our submarket, and then right below that, you'll provide those hard numbers. So even though you guys don't get the Excel, I just wanted to make a note here. This is exactly what the Excel looks like. This is going to be a chart of your historical information as well as your forecasting. So going back to 2012, we can see historically how much inventory was in that submarket, how many units were completed, and these are market rate rentals only, how much inventory was vacant, so where that vacancy percentage was, and it seems like it's crept up over time, now slowly going back down again with the demand rising, how many units were absorbed in that particular quarter or year, what that average asking rent looks like, and then right below that, effective rent. Now we are able to get effective rent simply because we do track that free rent concession. So your asking rent minus that free rent concession will get you your effective rent. Let's look at the most recent quarter again for a better perspective.
I have one question here. Somebody
Sure.
asks, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, no
Someone
worries.
asks if you could explain construction absorption.
Yes, absolutely. Let's go back up to that chart. Sorry for the scrolling. Let me just jump back up here. So what this chart is saying is of the existing units plus the units that are built, how many of those units were absorbed? Now we're able to capture that absorption rate because we do individual surveys, and we can simply aggregate all of those different units that were leased up into one absorption figure. So even though nothing was built, the existing units that were there, 82 of those were absorbed. And if you wanted to get a better picture of what kind of pool we're looking at, I'll just jump back down here to that spreadsheet or this chart. Here we go, 15,000 units total. So 82 within that last quarter. And there you go. So hopefully that answers your question. If not, please let me know. Great. All right, so again, that's your historical perspective. I'm just going to jump down here and you can see our forecasting. So the forecasting that we do, again, is really, I would say it's very highly regarded in the industry. Accurate information. We even provide backtesting white papers every single year just to show how close we are on those figures. But the methodology is going to rely heavily on knowing what completions are coming to the market, understanding how the market has moved over time in general, and then also leveraging economic and demographic data, which we get from Moody's. So that can be anything from population to household income to employment, and we'll see those figures in a moment, but those are really going to be the three different data points that we use to create these forecasts. So for example, we're expecting about almost 200 units roughly by the end of the year. You can see where that vacancy rate is going to go, and let me actually go back up to first quarter. It's like about 0.9%, or is that's the rent growth, my apologies. 9.1% is where we were at the end of first quarter. Now, if we go down to the end of this year, looks like it'll bump back to 9.5%, so not too much, but again, that's most likely because of those new units that are coming online, taking a bit of time to lease up. But it looks like absorption that we're expecting seems pretty high. And these are these different scenarios that I had mentioned. Again, your moderate downturn and your severe downturn. Even just looking at the vacancy rates in those different scenarios, again, much, much higher, expecting a little bit more volatility in the market, maybe a higher recession, again, something similar to 2008. Now, everything that we're looking at right now is actually going to be based on all types of properties, but I did want to show you something else called our class cut report, where we can take all this information and cut it from class A to BC. Again, just knowing that in a lot of these various markets, you won't necessarily see the same performance of an A building to a BC building. So that's exactly what we're doing here. Class A properties historically, and then if you jump down, Class BC properties. Now, there very well could be some markets where there maybe isn't too much of a difference between the two. If we just look here, 11.7% vacancy in Class A buildings, $1,645 rents. Jump down to BC, 4.4% vacancy, $787 rent. So it's almost half when you look at the vacancy percentage or even the asking rent. So clearly a pretty big difference of a BC asset to an A asset. So that's what we're doing here. We're taking all this information from that submarket and then drilling it down into a Class A versus a BC building. Again, we're going to be able to do this for all of our submarkets and those primary markets. So that is your submarket class cut. Jumping back up here to my table of contents, I do want to show you the submarket executive briefing. This is a write-up that we do every single quarter. Really good feedback on it so far from our clients, but essentially what it is a 2-page write-up, just analyzing all the different data points that we looked at. Where is the average rent? Where's the average vacancy, and how do we expect that to look by the end of the year? It's going to be divided into 4 different sections where we can take a look at that particular submarket, and if it's considered an outlier, be able to identify where some of the other submarkets are doing a little bit better or worse. And the best thing about this report is that you're getting that historical information in one section. So over the last decade, we saw over 6,500 units come online. We even saw some that were converted. The next section here is going to go into the asking and effective rent. So this is to say, we know now what the average asking rent and effective rent looks like, but how does that look like if we were to break it down into individual bedrooms? Are landlords offering concessions, and how much is that? So that's your asking and effective rent section, and I'll just jump back up here. So you'll notice this kind of reads like a newspaper. The methodology as well as the format's actually going to be the same exact way if you were to look at this for another sector. So again, office or industrial or retail, same really format here. Third section is going to talk about those economic drivers. So in this case, we're in apartments. We'd want to focus on households, population. How many people have moved to this market? Where's the demand coming from? And how has that changed over the last 10 years? How many units were absorbed? And how does that affect your inventory? And then finally, an outlook. So again, we've taken a look at the last decade, even the last quarter. Where does Reis see this market in the next couple of years? According to our economists, and just looking at the market in general, we can give you a good projection here for the next couple of years. Now these will come out exactly when the quarter begins. So when we have our second quarter stats on August 1st, you will see a new executive briefing to follow along with it. Jumping up to the top here, let's look at our metro trend. I won't go through everything because it is actually very similar to the submarket. But again, you can see we're not really changing the analysis here. It's just focusing on the entire market. So a lot more properties, maybe a little bit of a different story when we look at rents by age. Since Austin has various different neighborhoods and submarkets, this will look a little bit different. But I did want to jump down here to show you that economic and demographic data that I had mentioned. Again, coming from Moody's. So the different things that we'll measure will be anything from employment to households to average household income and population. Now, these are all the charts, but I do want to show you the hard numbers below. There we go. This is forecasting. Let's look at our most recent quarter. There we go. Okay, so employment, households, average household income, and population. Now, if you're looking at this for office or industrial, the employment will be broken out separately for you. All right, so that will cover our metro. Just wanted to specify here, if you wanted to pull a metro class cut, just like we did for the submarket, that is available. You also have a metro executive briefing if you're more looking at the MSA of Austin as opposed to a specific submarket. And then we also have a report called the submarket overview. Now this is going to be very helpful in a large market like Austin. I think Dallas and Fort Worth are pretty big as well in terms of a submarket breakout. But this is a nice overview where we can show, at more of a macro level, how do all the submarkets look in comparison to each other. I'm just identifying any outliers quickly. It looks like that far north central submarket's got that lowest rent. However, the vacancy is also a little bit low as well. So again, just a nice comparison across the board. You can see which submarkets are offering more concessions or where the rents are a little bit higher. And then tying everything together is our Reis Observer. Now, this is a report that we actually write. We leverage sources in the market. So you'll see a lot of sources here based on Austin. If you look at it for another market such as Dallas, we'll have those local sources as well. But what we're doing is actually using those sources and our data to provide a little bit more commentary on why the market is performing the way that it is. So these will come out every 90 days. Focusing on the economy, there you go, Austin Business Journal. BLS, I can see over here on the right-hand side, as well as Moody's, where the employment actually falls by sector. So it looks like a lot of employment here is government, professional business, consumer trade. Again, that's coming directly from the BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics. Texas real estate business, there's another local source. So anything that you need to reference will be italicized. Moody's is here as well, and that's a source you're always going to see quoted. And then I think another good thing about this report is not only are we focusing on people who are actually in that market and their perspective, we'll also give you information on other sectors. So we were focusing on apartments. However, I have a little blurb here that's going to drill into office specifically, as well as retail and industrial. And I'll zoom out a little bit here. We'll also identify anything that stands out, such as a major office transaction or a major office building that's coming online. And this one's probably going to be a little bit longer again because Austin's a pretty big market, but I'm just going to jump down here again to the relevant sector that we're looking at, apartments. Okay, we have information on retail and industrial, and then at the very bottom of the report, every single primary market here, again, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, those larger markets, what we'll do is give you a capital markets write-up. So where are the top transactions occurring in this metro? Which ones were they? What was the price per square foot? Who was involved in the deal? Okay, and then we'll do that same exact thing for the other sectors as well. So these observers will come out every 90 days. Takes a little bit longer because we're actually writing them, and again, pulling in the local and regional sources for that perspective. Okay, I do see another question. I don't know if you want to answer that.
Well, they're talking about a specific market, so
Okay.
we'll save that till later.
Sure, sounds good. All right, and then there is one final report that I wanted to go over here. That's going to be your new construction listing. And so what we're doing here is looking at Austin as a whole and then breaking out what the construction looks like from those 4 phases that I had mentioned: proposed, planned, under construction, as well as completed. So these are going to be the construction deliveries for that quarter, market rate rentals or other condominiums. Looks like a lot of market rate activity here in the last year. Where most of that activity is happening, looks like that far south submarket, Round Rock, Georgetown area. So it's pretty busy in terms of new inventory in the last year. And we can even break that down further into what was physically completed. Moving down here, we're going to benchmark that particular market against the entire country. So Austin is up there. It's number 2 out of all of those markets within that Southwest region. Now, if we look at it from a national perspective, 21 out of all of our primary markets. That's 82 total. On the higher end, we have New York for a lot of inventory growth. On the lower end, Tucson, Arizona. If we're looking at just this particular region, Dallas is just above Austin. Little Rock, Arkansas is going to be at the bottom there in terms of inventory growth. Again, all that will come from us speaking to developers and architects and verifying hard dates on these projects. Now this chart should look familiar. This is our construction and absorption. Again, we're just simply pulling that from the metro, but just to kind of keep everything in the same place from the new construction side. Same thing here. How many units were built and absorbed and what that ratio looks like. Now these last 2 sections here will really go into what does that particular market look like when buildings are completed? How long are properties taking to stabilize, and where is that occupancy rate when buildings complete? So it looks pretty high here, overall occupancy for Austin, and then if I were to go into it just based on the metro or the region or the entire country, we can see how that compares. Right, and right below that, your stabilization. So we define stabilization as the point when the occupancy or vacancy rate really reaches that metro's average, and we'll give you a historical perspective as well. Okay, so that will cover the market reports for Austin apartment. Again, I chose that central or downtown roughly area in terms of a submarket. We can go ahead and switch sectors, or we can take a look at another market. Somebody had a question.
Yeah, that would be great.
Sure.
Actually, could we show them all of the markets that we have in Texas?
Absolutely.
Some people are curious about that.
Absolutely. So I'm just going over to that market reports tab. And then again, it's going to vary in terms of coverage and inventory that's out there. But if I look at multifamily, this is just a quick map of all of those different markets.
The larger metro areas have tertiary markets within them.
The submarkets, correct.
Submarkets.
Yeah, so for example, we did Austin. Just jump over to Dallas really quick and you can see what that looks like. We do segment out Dallas and Fort Worth. As I understand, those are kind of like sister cities, right? But it seems like...
less so than it used to be.
Oh.
No, they've both grown so much.
Yeah, I think that's kind of our observation too, and that's probably why we've segmented them out. But yeah, it seems pretty different. If I just toggle between the 2, you can always do that through here too. Go back. Moving to office, if somebody wanted to look at that as well. Full coverage. Looking at retail. And then you do have access to both warehouse and flex. We segment out industrial simply because we know that with office space being more prominent in a flex property, the rents and lease terms are going to be a little bit different than warehouse. So that's why you actually see these broken out for you. And there's going to be 47 markets there total. If I go over to flex, those are going to be the major markets as well as warehouse as well.
I have a question.
Sure.
About markets. From somebody I know is a little partial. Lubbock has a very active apartment market. Why not so much information on Lubbock and Austin, 7 pages versus 84?
Lubbock, Texas?
Yes.
Yeah, so that is a tertiary market for us. So like I said, with a lot of tertiary markets, as long as there is enough a time series that we can publish, then it will eventually become a primary market. As I understand that, I've actually heard that before, that is a growing market.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. For multifamily, is it kind of the same story for retail or office that you know of?
Probably, yeah. They
Probably.
just went over it quarterly last year.
Oh, wow.
So that's when they start having.
Yeah, so let me pull that up just so that everyone can kind of see what the question is regarding. So what we have for our tertiary markets is actually called a performance monitor. You'll notice it actually looks the exact same way. The only major difference is that the time series won't go back as far. So I'll just open this really quickly. In a lot of our tertiary markets, the data will go back to about 2012, but take a look. Pop a blocker in here. Let's just go past that. Oh, there we go. Yeah, 2012. So again, yeah, it's really with the tertiary markets. It's the amount of inventory that we've seen, and as it grows, we'll continue to add on to it, but just not really there yet with Lubbock.
Just a matter of time.
It's just a matter of time, exactly.
Keep growing, Lubbock. You'll get it.
Exactly. But I will say we've tried to touch all corners of Texas since that's such a pretty big market in terms of coverage in general. Okay, another question?
Well, I have a couple.
Sure.
So, but I think we can still put those off if you want to keep on talking about anything else you want to show in the reports.
Yeah, in terms of office and retail, it's really just content that's different.
Mm-hmm.
The look and feel of the reports will be pretty similar. So if I go over to retail, we can do Austin again, or actually let's do another market. Switch it up a little bit. Do Fort Worth or Houston. Fascinated by Houston lately. Let's do Inner Loop. Interesting. And we'll generate the report. So when we talk about retail, really what we're focusing on are going to be strip centers, both neighborhood and community shopping centers. So it's really going to depend on what the makeup of that center looks like. Does it have a lot of anchors? Is it an enclosed mall, or is it just an open air strip center? So we try to segment that out really to focus on kind of what the ICSC considers retail space. So strip centers, generally anything about 10,000 square feet or above, has a parking lot, multiple tenants, an anchor tenant or non-anchored. Again, those are the tenants that are bringing a lot of foot traffic to the shopping center, a lot of national retailers. So that is something that we actively track. And I'll just go ahead and open this report for you so you can see it. We also have a, go ahead.
Places, but there's a lot going up in various cities in Texas that's sort of multi-use.
Mixed use.
Residential on the top, yeah.
Yeah.
Use, residential on the top, retail on the bottom. Where do those fall?
So we don't track rents and vacancies on those simply because those are going to be broken down into different lease terms. You're looking at probably triple net leases versus gross, which don't necessarily function the same. So to keep consistency on our trends, everything will be related to a neighborhood or community shopping center. But if you wanted to look at new construction, which I'll open now, actually look at the metro as well, that does cover any new projects in the pipeline that would be mixed use or malls or anything really considered retail. So I'll show you that as well. And there is a power center report too that'll go into power center and regional malls. A second to load. Okay. So again, look and feel is very similar, but you'll notice right away when we start opening the retail or office reports, content will be incredibly different. Again, just due to the nature of that sector. So what we'll do is we'll break down performance into neighborhood versus community shopping centers, usually looking at cheaper rents per square foot in anchor tenants. So you'll see a pretty different story there. And there's that anchor breakout for you as well. So both non-anchor and anchor, larger tenants versus smaller tenants or inline shops. And right away, pretty big difference here. Average is 13 versus 26. So pretty big difference. Non-anchor rent by vintage. So same thing that we had done for apartments, same thing we're doing here. A lot of the newer buildings, not too much of a shock to me, generating higher rents than some of the older ones. But something that we do track as well would be renovations on properties. So that could affect rent growth as well. So we have asking rent. We also have those submarket ranks, trending as well as forecasting. And that was for neighborhood. Right below that is for community. So in many cases, you're not going to see as many community shopping centers because, once they build one, it sort of takes up the entire market, and then, they'll build one probably a couple of miles away. So that's what we're doing here as well. What does a community shopping center look like in terms of rent and vacancy? I'll just jump down here again, same look and feel, but looking at the vacancy rate perspective. That was neighborhood. Here's community shopping centers. A little bit of a better story here when we look at community shopping centers in terms of leasing. Yeah, very low vacancies. And then I'm just going to show you at the bottom here, your trending and forecasting. Here we go. So again, everything is split up from neighborhood to community. Roughly around 8.2% looks like for a neighborhood shopping center. If I jump down here to community, 4.9%. So yeah, it seems like the demand for retail tenants is a little bit higher in community shopping centers. Yeah, in this particular submarket, right? We can do this for Houston as well, but I did drill down into a submarket. Now, I did want to show you again that new construction listing. A bit of a longer report. Here we go. So again, similar to what we had seen for apartments, but now we're talking retail. So what does inventory look like, or what's under construction, what's expected in the pipeline if you were to break it down into mixed use, for example, like you said, or a regional mall or power centers, and where is most of that activity? Yeah, so it's a good amount. It's 10.1% based on our analysis of neighborhood shopping centers, mixed use over 28%. So it's just to your point,
Yeah, really
clearly a lot of activity there. Yep. Okay, now there's your tally, but if we wanted to see the hard numbers, I can go down to the bottom of the report, and not only will we provide you with the location of these properties, but we'll let you know who the leasing agent or developer is on those properties as well if you wanted to contact those people. So this is broken down by submarket, and it's going to be organized by the status. So the most recently completed towards the top, all the way down to the bottom for the proposed properties. So I see mostly community neighborhood. Let's just scroll down here. You see some freestanding buildings. There's a mixed use property. This one's in Cypress. Actually, it was completed. So we will keep these properties on here for 2 years just so you can see, again, the pipeline. A couple mixed use here. Actually, a lot. Yep. Mostly in Cypress. Okay, you're leaving it the owner. If we can't get that developer, you'll be provided with the owner information. This is probably going to be a little bit longer, again, because Houston is a pretty big market, and it is segmented down by submarket. But you can kind of see here again where we come from the pipeline perspective. Okay, and then that power center report, since everything that we've been looking at is neighborhood versus community. This gives you a good benchmark. How does a power center compare in this particular market to a neighborhood shopping center? In many cases, they are much more expensive, and I think you kind of pay that premium to be in a mall as a tenant versus being in a strip center. But yes, we can definitely see that correlation within this market.
Well, Houston is very famous.
Yes. So this is going to be triple net now. The price per square foot, triple net rents. Again, we do track taxes, CAM, and insurance, and that's going to be separated. So you're looking at just what that base rent looks like. Vacancies are a lot lower too, it seems. And then if you just wanted a quick breakout, here are all those power center and regional malls that we would be tracking in that pipeline. So again, just with retail, giving you that full perspective of neighborhood and community shopping centers. And this report is exclusively dedicated to power centers and regional malls. Yeah, it seems very busy here. Now, I'm from the city in New York, and we really don't have anything comparable to this, so I'm always fascinated just to see how much, there's no room. There's no room at all. It's all skyscrapers. And I think if you go more to the suburbs, you'll see a lot, but the city in general is really, really dense. So it's, yeah, dense markets like that don't really have the room for retail. Yeah. So again, this is actually going to look exactly the same once we look at Dallas, Fort Worth, pretty much the same look and feel. But I did want to be able to drone to a different market and different sector to give you that perspective too. Another question?
Keep talking about what is in the reports.
Sure.
As much as you would like.
Let's go over to office.
We're going to let Ayana keep talking about the reports for a minute, and then before we close up, everybody, I'll make sure that we go through and show you how to access your reports from the TAR website and show you, what is available there. Ayana right now is accessing reports from the Reis site, which is not what you guys do. You guys access them through the TAR site, and we will take you through how to do that.
All right, so I went ahead and I pulled Dallas. I can switch it up, another market. Let's look at the CBD.
Someone said our office rents, gross or triple net, etc. Do you break those down?
We do, yes. So for the office sector and the apartment sector, they're going to be gross. So for apartments, you'll have that gross monthly asking rent. And then for office, you'll have that gross price per square foot per year asking rent. And then for industrial, again, that's warehouse and flex, as well as retail, those are going to be triple net. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's go ahead and look at that CBD. And I didn't mention it before, but there is the ability when you generate all the reports to pull multiple submarkets at once or pull multiple markets. So I'm sort of picking and choosing the areas that I want to look at, but you have the ability, as Amy mentioned, when you go through to pull all your submarkets.
So, because I pull the reports.
Right, but all submarkets can be pulled at once. So you don't have to just select one submarket. You can have everything in a report, right?
I pull
like a whole suite.
Yeah,
yes,
everything.
Yes.
Everything gets everything.
Perfect. Same page.
That was super specific. I know.
My apologies. Okay, so we're back to office again, talking about the different types of class properties or asset classes, looking specifically at that Dallas CBD.
So while we're on this page, I'll just say, so when I download these reports to the TAR pages, what I do is select all, and I go through every market and every sub-market, and I click select all. So every report is going to have everything. It won't have a combination of sub-markets, but it will have both your sub-market and your main market information in it, because I check all of those. So every report that people download from the TAR site has complete information for all of those things. So some of it may be a little overlapping, but I want to make sure everybody
I understand,
as much as they can.
Yep. Okay. So let's go ahead and take a look at the trending information there, as well as the class cut. And I'll throw in the observers, since that's going to be a little bit different here. And go ahead and pull that report in PDF. Now, if anybody, I don't know if anybody arrived after I had mentioned this, but when we delineate our submarkets, they're going to be based on the natural, economic, and man-made boundaries around that particular area. So things like bridges, roads, rivers, mountains, obvious things like that. But we also consider market movement. So if we find that, based on someone's feedback earlier about Lubbock, Texas, if we find that the inventory there is sufficient enough to provide an analysis, that boundary can change. That's something that we actually look at the end of every single year based on client feedback, based on our own internal research. And I can say with confidence, just being a former researcher at this firm, I've been here now 7 years. When I started, I was doing some research on areas we don't track. So really building out that database, making sure that the coverage is continually changing is really, really important to us. We just need to make sure that there is sufficient inventory, that we can actually be able to provide relationships with our contacts, and that the information is consistent to what we always track. Because we don't want one market to sort of stand out in terms of look and feel. We want it all to be consistent. So, based on your point, I'm sure that with our research department looking at a tertiary market like Lubbock, there's a chance that we actually have a ton of inventory that we're reviewing right now and are actually getting ready to publish. So that's something that's pretty cool about Reis, is that everything is innovative, right? We want to make sure that we're continuing to add more and more markets and coverage, and that the submarkets make sense to that particular metro. So just looking at the submarket, for example. So now again, we're drilling into asking rent by age. So it seems like a lot of that inventory is a little bit more expensive once you get to newer buildings. You didn't see as much inventory built in the submarket in the 90s, but then it does grow, mostly positive rent growth. Again, benchmarking that submarket to your metro historically, and it'll go back here 2 years. And then your forecast and your trend 5 years back and 5 years forward. Looking at vacancy rates, it seems like, interesting. So the vacancy is actually higher in some of the older buildings within this submarket. And actually a couple of outliers here in that high end, over 43%. We've got about 8 properties here looking at over 43% vacancy rates. Vacancy is a little bit higher overall than Dallas, and then where that sits in terms of a submarket ranking. Yep. I want to make sure also to mention, sometimes we get questions about the type of tenants and what we would consider actual vacant space. So when we do our surveys, we make sure that we're not talking about a subletter or maybe a dark tenant, because that could be a little bit different. We want to make sure, is this space actually vacant, and what that asking rent is for today. So not asking rents for an in-place tenant, but if that tenant were to leave, let's say they are dark, or if the space is physically vacant, what is that asking rent in today's market? So we do make sure to specify those questions when we do our surveys. Lease terms. So we've been talking about free rent mostly, retail, office, industrial, really different animal. Not only free rent, but we also want to talk about TIs. Yeah, so on average, it looks like $20 per square foot. Again, these are based on gross leases. These are based on new leases. Expenses, that tax, CAM, and insurance that we talked about before, looks like about 9.9. Leasing commission on average about 7%. Average leases are about 3 years, and then free rent about 3 months offered. Yeah. Now, this is not to say all these concessions are offered at the same time. It's just to say, in general, what are the average concessions being offered? And this might be a little unique to Reis, so I'll explain this one. CRD, that is contract rent discount. So if a landlord were to come off a lease by any percentage, what would that be? So we do track actually 3 concessions based are more than the 2 that you're probably used to seeing, free rent and TIs. Okay, the inventory again will follow suit, just like we looked at for vacancy and rent. Construction and absorption. So this might explain some of those high vacancy rates. Looks like we had some negative absorption. That could be anything from a massive tenant leaving a building. That could really affect your absorption rate. It seems like that was sort of the case in the last year, although if we look 3 years ago, mostly positive absorption. So a little bit more of a positive story there historically. And we do project that to continue. So as much that will come online, as much of that will probably be absorbed. And that's something that you can actually look to the observer for. And what was that major tenant that left the market? What is causing this spike in the vacancy rate? A little bit more color commentary. Here is our trending that we talked about. So you can see historically where the vacancy rates have fallen, a little bit of an incline here. But again, a lot of negative absorption over the last couple of years. Effective rents have gone up as well. Maybe landlords offering more concessions to get people in the door. And then the forecasting. Okay, so a little bit more of a better story here. It looks like we expect that vacancy rate to just go down by a bit. But again, a lot of new completions expected here. within this submarket. Yeah, seems like it will be very busy in the CBD for the next couple of years. Let's go ahead and I think I did pull that observer for this example. Yes. Zoom out a bit here. Okay, so usually my eye goes right to those local sources, Dallas Morning News, Dallas Business Journal, again, people who are actually in that market and their perspective on what's going on there. Moody's, BLS, that employment by sectors, again, pretty same look and feel. Our outlook for the market. And then again, going into the real estate market. So what does the absorption figure look like? How's that affected by the properties that are under construction? Let's jump down here. We also get more into the supply and demand. It looks like a pretty steady theme here. And then who are some of those major retailers that have either left the market or tenants that have left the market or who are coming online. So State Farm, that's something that I did hear about. 500,000 square feet came online.
Yeah. And right next to that, where it says Legacy West, that's where I'm going this afternoon because that is where our commercial development bus tour is going to be a conference this year, everybody.
Ah, okay.
So we're going to Legacy West.
Yep. So definitely, yes, a lot of project-specific information here. A little bit different than the executive briefing. Again, the executive briefing is crunching the numbers for you, just telling a story with what's going on in the market, whereas this is providing a lot more context.
I have somebody, Kirk, who says, please tell listeners when Reis calls to follow up on research questions that the agents share freely so we can have accurate data.
But repeat that, I'm sorry.
Said, please tell everyone that if you guys call for information to speak freely to the Reis people so that the information is accurate.
Yes, yes, that's always helpful. Definitely.
This is all for you guys. Yeah,
absolutely.
We're looking at 11 o'clock,
yes,
so I definitely want to make sure we get to how to access your TAR.
Yes.
So I'm going to take over for a minute. You stay right there. And I am going to show you guys how to get these from the TAR website. Now, Ayana's been showing you a lot of the Reis website, but we're going to go to show how you guys get them. So what we do, I should have had this queued up. I do apologize. What we do is we download all of the reports and we mount them here on our server for you guys to pull down. So let's go to the TAR website down here. Tickety, tickety, tick. So sorry. Come on. See what other questions we've got while we're waiting. We are in Victoria. Can you please show us the map? All right, well, we will show you what reports. If I have investors and want to share some of this information depending on what they're looking for. Okay, so this is a question we get a lot because I know that the end user licensing agreement that you stumble across when you download these is a little bit big and scary. We want you to use these. We want you to share this information with your clients. We don't want the printed up versions of these reports to be floating around out in the wild. We definitely want you guys to use this and share it with your clients, but we don't want other people to be able to access. Okay, so here we are on the TAR site. As you can see, I am already signed in. Where you're going to go to find the forms is you're going to go to commercial. And when we get to the commercial landing page, you see right here, Texas Commercial Market Reports. So let's go to our Texas Commercial Market Reports. All right, so here's the big scary EULA. I, of course, recommend that you read these and then agree to the terms and conditions. So this is how you, and I'm not sure what's going on here. I think that's just this machine, but I'll double check. So what you're going to do is just select your year. You select your quarter. We've only got Q1 so far this year. Then you select what sector you want to go to. So let's look at office. Then you select the city that is available. So these are all the markets available for office. so far. So yes, we have Tyler, we have Sherman. If your community is not on there, we're sorry. It is just for the reasons that Ayana explained earlier, that they just don't have enough data to make these kind of reports for your area. So let's go to Lubbock since it came up. You will have another visit from the EULA to understand. Okay, and so what you'll do is you can either just look at it or you can download it. And again, what I do is I check all of those boxes that Ayana checked, so that you're getting all of the information that is available for that market when you download them. All right, let's go back. And so if you go to one of the markets, yes, still understand.
Mm-hmm. We can, while we're here, I guess we'll do the Victoria one, so that for apartment.
Okay, sure.
I think that was a question.
I don't, yeah, so first I'm going to show them what happens if we do one of the larger markets.
Oh, yes.
So that you see what your choices are. So if we click on one of the larger markets, and again with the EULA, then you will have a choice of all of the sub-markets. So of the 5 major markets, Houston, San Antonio, Fort Worth, Dallas, and Austin, there are sub-markets available. All of the other markets are single markets, and they do not have this breakout. And that is not because we don't love you, it's just because they don't have the information. So scroll down here. Yes, you have to agree to the terms and conditions a lot, guys. Sorry. All right, so let's talk about Victoria. Q1, apartments, Victoria. All right, we understand. Show that one. What? Let's just look at it then. It doesn't want to download. There we go.
Yeah. And so the map will actually be at the bottom. I think somebody had asked about that. Just jump down. Okay. Oh, I'm going to actually zoom out a bit. I think this is 2. There we go. Yeah. Yeah, so then that will be your quick coverage. And then regardless of the market that you're looking at, as soon as you open the report, you can always scroll right to the bottom and it'll show you a map of what it looks like, submarkets or metro. Victoria's a little smaller, won't have submarkets, but you know, if you are looking at a larger market, you can just scroll to the bottom and it will give you the map.
Okay. All right, so I'm looking through our questions here, and we're going to wrap up here, guys. So go ahead and get your questions in. If you have any questions for Ayana about methods or information in the reports, can we get these detailed reports for submarkets like Tyler? So we just showed that. Can I get the raw data in Excel? Right now, we're just doing the PDF versions of these reports, Fred. Lynn says, I saw affordable housing was on the Reis page as new. Will we have those reports available? I don't know the answer to that. That is above my pay grade, Lynn, but I will make a note of it. And if there is enough demand, we'll see what happens. Anybody else have any questions? Ayana, you have any last thoughts you want to share with us?
Well, actually, I don't know if somebody, the person who asked about Tyler, so that is something we also track for multifamily, so you can just get it through here.
Sure.
And then generate the same way.
Right. Okay, another question popped up. Do you expect that other submarkets will be added at any time in the somewhat near future? Pearland, Alvin, Manville, Brazoria County. Is there a population or is there a number cutoff at some point when things start popping up?
Yeah, so I remember and this probably could have changed because that was 7 years ago, but when I was doing research, we wanted to make sure we had roughly like 20 or so properties at least that we can use. If it's not the submarket, it's the metro, but if there's only 2 or 3 properties in a neighborhood, it just wouldn't be enough because if one of those properties doesn't participate, then we're looking at market analysis based on 2 properties and it'll be biased. Yeah. So we want to try to make sure there's a good amount of properties to create in a metro, and then in a case like a tertiary market, once those neighborhoods start segmenting out and performing really differently, we can divide that into submarkets.
Right. Perfect.
Yeah.
All right. So someone says, what is flex R&D property?
Yeah, so for industrial, we segment out warehouse from flex. Warehouse properties have more industrial space, and flex properties will have more office. Generally, we try to look at anything that's industrial with 25% or more of the entire space dedicated to office. That's considered flex R&D, research and development.
Right. All right, terrific. All right. If anybody has questions about these reports, you can call me, Amy, at TAR. Just call 512-480-8200, which is our main line, and ask for Amy. Or you can shoot me an email at agamber@TexasRealtors.com, and I will either answer your question or find somebody who can. Want to check all our boxes and stuff like that. Make sure we don't have any unanswered questions. Doesn't look like it. All right, great. So I think that wraps it up for today. I did record this, so we will post our slideshow and we will post the recording probably next week. Thanks everybody for tuning in. And again, like I said, if you have questions, please don't hesitate to call up here to TAR in Austin. Ask them for Amy right here, and I will be happy to either answer it or get an answer for you. So, all right, let's come back, little Reese. With that, folks, we are going to sign out. It was great seeing everybody. Take care of yourselves, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.